Chapter 41, Objective. This chapter is updated by novels.pl. With this, Mage Merlin would definitely be pleased. Most importantly, with this favorable cooperation as a start, this future master alchemist would most likely consider the Black Horn auction first for future endeavors. This was the true reason for Khadga's cheerful mood. Cooperating with the great alchemist that would soon step on the path of a master alchemist was something that every auction house yearned for, and it seemed that this could be the start of a very friendly relationship. A friendly relationship with a future master alchemist. The endless possibilities made Khadga feel cheerful just thinking about it, as he slowly raised the auction hammer in his hand. In that case, 300,000 gold going once, 300,000 gold going twice. High Mage Khadga, please wait. Just as Khadga was about to seal the deal, a young mage entered the venue in a hurry. The newcomer was Ryan, the eldest son of the Monchai family, the one who was known for becoming a great mage before the age of 30. Alright then, it seems that the Monchai family needs a little bit of time. When Khadga heard this, his eyes were shining. How could he not agree? He watched Ryan entering the box on one side while making some jokes. Khadga knew that Ryan's arrival definitely meant a new bid. Sure enough, the bid was quickly announced. 400,000 gold. Our Monchai family is willing to buy these two potions for 400,000 gold. When this price was announced, the venue went silent once again. They had been shocked time and time again tonight. This auction was so different from any they had seen before. Disbelief was plastered on the faces of all the guests, and some even pinched themselves to make sure they weren't dreaming. 400,000 gold. This couldn't be described as only extremely expensive anymore. In the history of the Black Horn auction house, such a shocking price had never appeared. And also, this had already far surpassed the proper value for these potions. Even just spending this money to get close to a genuine master alchemist wouldn't be worth this much. The box of the Monchai family was tightly shut, but everyone's eyes were fixated on that place, staring as if they wanted to see through the wall. Why would Monchai, who hadn't bid before, suddenly bid 400,000 after Ryan's arrival? Crazy. This was really crazy. Faced with such a crazy price, even the Silver Moon mercenary group of Thousand Sails City couldn't fight it. Sassy stood there stupefied, almost raising his hand several times, but he ultimately lowered it and said with a regretful face, "I give up." Then, 400,000 gold going once, 400,000 gold going twice, 400,000 going three times, sold. Congratulations, President Monchai of the Twin Moons Chamber of Commerce. You have won a volcano potion and a ghost potion for 400,000 gold. The hammer in Khadga's hand fell down as he announced the end of the auction. But at this point, no one cared about that. They were all wondering if there was something wrong with Monchai. Why would he bid so much just for these two potions? Even some people inside the Monchai family's box were thinking that way. No way. 400,000 gold just for two potions? Mason was sitting there, staring at the two potions delivered by the Black Horn auction house, his mouth wide open from shock. 400,000 gold. That was 400,000 gold. If the one sitting in front of him wasn't his father, Mason might have gone over to check whether he had a fever or not. What do you know? Due to being in a good mood after successfully getting the two potions, Monchai surprisingly didn't get angry at Mason's question. He only glanced at his younger son and said, "This is what your uncle wants." Uncle? The fearless Mason turned deathly pale when he heard that word. Any outsiders might think that the most important person of the Monchai family was the one in charge of the Twin Moons Chamber of Commerce, or perhaps Ryan, the future High Mage that the Monchai family would rely on in the future. But the three members of the Monchai family inside the box knew that the true support of the Monchai family was neither Monchai nor Ryan. It was actually Monchai's younger brother, who was part of the Black Tower. Apart from a limited few members of the Monchai family, nobody in Thousand Sails City knew that Monchai had a younger brother called Solon Monchai. But he had been taken away by a mage of the Black Tower when he was born, and he didn't even return when their father died. He had been forgotten by most over the course of almost 50 years. This matter was the biggest secret of the Monchai family. A dozen years ago, Solon came back to Thousand Sails City one time, and after having a long talk with Monchai, he took Ryan away with him for the next dozen years. When Ryan came back, he became a great mage that was not yet 30. Monchai's feelings toward his younger brother were very complicated. He felt some unfamiliarity, some respect, and even some dread, because he had power that Monchai couldn't even imagine. But Monchai knew that even if the whole Monchai family was burnt to the ground one day, as long as Solon was still there, the family could be rebuilt overnight. Monchai never doubted Solon's words. Even when Solon told Monchai to find a way to get the house that Lochmerlin left behind, he immediately sought out Fario. Now, Solon urged him to get the 2 potions, so he immediately bid 4,000 gold for them. Uncle. What did Uncle say? You shouldn't ask what you shouldn't ask. Yes. After giving Mason an unhappy glare, Monchai slowly sat down and looked at the 2 potions. Lochmerlin had already died, and the flashing gold chamber of commerce had already collapsed. It was time for the Monchai family to get involved in the alchemy business. This was the true reason that Monchai spent 4,000 gold to win these 2 potions. The Monchai family wanted to take over the alchemy market of Thousand Sails City. It wasn't a new goal. At first, the Monchis couldn't get much of the market share because of Lochmerlin and his flashing gold chamber of commerce. But ever since the death of Lochmerlin and the fall of the flashing gold chamber of commerce, the Monchai family's desire to annex the alchemy market was getting stronger every day. For this reason, Monchai had already written a few dozen letters to Solon, wanting to get some support from the Black Tower. But unfortunately, Solon also had his own things to deal with and had never given Monchai an answer in the affirmative. Until now. The sudden appearance of the 2 potions made Monchai realize that this might be an opportunity, and thus, he immediately sent someone to notify Ryan and have him contact Solon to inform him of the existence of the potions. And just as expected, after hearing Ryan's explanation, the 2 potions immediately caught the attention of the higher-ups of the Black Tower. Immediately afterwards, Ryan brought Solon's words back to Monchai at the venue, and the price of these 2 potions went up to 4,000 gold. To Monchai, the support of the Black Tower was far more important. In contrast, what was 4,000 gold to him? As long as he was able to take over the alchemy market left behind by the flashing gold chamber of commerce, let alone spending 4,000 gold, he would even be willing to go bankrupt. The potential profits of an alchemy business. Monchai was very clear about this. Oh right, Ryan. Monchai suddenly remembered that the Gilded Rose was also still in the alchemy market, so he told his older son, pay attention to the movements of the Gilded Rose. I keep having a feeling that there is something wrong with that Merlin kid. In fact, Monchai didn't pay much attention to Merlin at the start. Even if he brought about the recovery of the Gilded Rose, even if he made the 9th rank mage go home with his tail between his legs, in Monchai's eyes, these things weren't too alarming. A small Gilded Rose, a newly advanced mage, Monchai could have him crushed like an ant just by raising his hand. But today, Monchai suddenly felt some uncertainty. At the start, that kid won the Styx water with 50,000 gold. Monchai had been worried about whether another force was getting involved, which might make it difficult for him to get his hands on that old house. But afterwards, Lin Yan fought him for the red flame fish oil, and surprisingly used 1,200 gold. There was no mistake there. He bid 1,200 gold and then received the item. Even when Lochmerlin was alive, getting such a large amount wasn't easy, not to mention the fact that a few months ago, Merlin couldn't even produce 8,000 gold to pay his debt. Monchai was sure that this time, there was definitely a problem with Merlin. This time, Monchai was completely on guard. He hadn't paid attention to the small Gilded Rose before, but he couldn't continue like that. No one could be clearer about the shipwreck of Lochmerlin than Monchai. If he ignored the Gilded Rose and let Merlin grow, he would regret it sooner or later. Fortunately, there should still be time. After Monchai gave instructions to Ryan, he looked back at the 2 potions. Since your Gilded Rose is in the alchemy business, when those 2 great alchemists arrive, your Gilded Rose will be completely uprooted. Monchai sank into contemplation while Mason was growing very anxious. The auction had been over for a while, So why did his father look as if he had no plans to leave? What should I do? If I waste time, that Merlin kid will definitely get away. I might not have such a good opportunity next time. Mason was jittery and restless for a long time before he finally found a reason to slip away. Of course, this wasn't because Mason was quick-witted and managed to find an exceptionally good reason. It was because Monchai's mind was filled with thoughts of how to deal with the Gilded Rose. He had no time to spend on that kid, that's all. Chapter 42. Are you hungry? This chapter is updated by novels.pl. Let's go. This young master will help you vent your anger. Mason took Jonathan with him as he left the box. He called a few of the mercenaries hired by the Monchai family. There was one with pretty decent strength named Mengsk, a 9th-rank swordsman whose status in the family wasn't low. With such a capable subordinate protecting him, Mason felt 100% safe. His eyes scanned across the venue as he tried to look for Mafia Merlin. At this moment, Mason was already plotting. After finding that Merlin, I'll ask him if he wants to eat 2 glass bottles, or if he wants to eat 2 glass bottles and then be beaten up. Mason brought his group and looked around the venue for a long time. It was so hard to find him because after the end of the auction, Khadgar invited Lin Yun to a reception room. Mage Merlin, your potions sold for a total of 4,000,000 gold. After deducting the 2,000,000 gold you used in the auctions, as well as the 120,000 gold in auctions fees, you earned a total of 1,880,000 gold. You can withdraw the amount in any place in Nocent affiliated with the Black Horn Chamber of Commerce. When Khadgar handed over the crystal card, he was smiling while squinting. When he looked at Lin Yun, it felt as if he wasn't looking at a living person, but a walking and talking bag of gold. It wasn't surprising that Khadgar would act like that. A master alchemist could turn anything he touched into gold. Any materials he got his hands on could be changed into something magical that would create miracles. To be able to establish a cooperative relationship with such an alchemist was a rare opportunity. Today's 2 potions were the perfect example. The final price was 4,000,000 gold, and the Black Horn auctions fees were 3%. This 3% couldn't be overlooked, considering the size of the sale. It was almost the equivalent to the price of an inheritance magic tool, and the auction house had earned that amount just with Khadgar's words. Not to mention how much the incredible sales promoted the name of the auction house. The auction just now was the perfect example. 2 potions infinitesimally close to the master alchemist level were sold for 4,000,000 gold. It was enough to shake the eastern regions. In the next auction, there would inevitably be more alchemists and more wealthy patrons who didn't hope to sell their wares at a high price, and who didn't want to buy the best things for themselves. And everything was brought to them by this young mage. Khadgar's smile became even brighter as he reminded Mage Merlin, if you have anything good, don't forget to auction it at our Black Horn auction. Of course, of course. Lin Yun was very clear about Khadgar's thoughts, but this was also a good thing for Lin Yun. As a mage, Lin Yun's needs in terms of magic materials could be described as bottomless. And in the entire Thousand Sails city, the place with the largest amount of rare items was without a doubt the Black Horn auction house. Establishing a good relationship with this force would save Lin Yun a lot of time. To a mage, time had always been the most valuable resource. Since Khadgar took the initiative to mention it, how could Lin Yun not agree? The 2 men hit it off, and after a bit of discussion, established a cooperative relationship. Afterwards, Lin Yun gave a list to Khadgar. It was a list of over 100 magic materials of all kinds. Each of them was rarely seen on the market, and many of them were materials that Khadgar himself had never seen. After hearing Lin Yun's description of the more obscure ones, he got a rough understanding of what they were. When Lin Yun first made his request, Khadgar patted his chest and assured that it could be done. But after reading the list of items, Khadgar felt a bit nervous. He inwardly admired this young alchemist's extensive knowledge, but his heart was also beating very quickly. Some of the materials on this list were too shocking, and even with the power of the Black Horn auction house, they might only get a few. Khadgar held the list of items for a very long time, hesitating whether he finalized the agreement or not. If this was made known, no one would believe that this esteemed high mage, The chief auctioneer and chief appraiser of the Black Horn auction, Khadga, would actually be hesitating and reconsidering in front of a young mage. His nervous expression made it seem like he was too afraid of angering his counterpart. This was Khadga, after all, someone who was both a high mage and a great alchemist that also skillfully ran the huge Black Horn auction house. His status in Thousand Sails City was more or less equivalent to that of Solomon, the leader of the Sage Tower. But now, Khadga was truly wavering in his decision, as he was afraid of angering this potential source of business, because the person in front of him was a future master alchemist. Once he stepped into the master rank, his status would instantly soar. Even an archmage would have no choice but to act respectful in front of him. Such a person was an existence that could make miracles and even decide the life or death of a high mage. They could give endless benefits to a great alchemist with just a sentence. Being nervous and hesitant in front of such a person was perfectly normal. Khadga thought for a long time before giving an uncertain answer. To be honest, Mage Merlin, I don't want to deceive you. The materials on your list are too rare and hard to find. Even if I use the power of the Black Horn Chamber of Commerce, I might not be able to help you acquire them. The only guarantee I can make is that I'll spare no effort to obtain them for you. After giving his reply, Khadga carefully looked at his counterpart's expression, afraid that this uncertain answer would create a crack in their newly established cooperation. I'll be troubling High Mage Khadga, then. But that answer was actually enough for Lin Yun. Others might not know, but Lin Yun had gotten this list from a large encyclopedia on rare magic materials. All of these materials were among the rarest and most precious that Lin Yun remembered. Even at the peak of Nocent's magic civilization, those influential and practically omnipotent mages would pay a huge price for these rare materials. Lin Yun only took out the list to try his luck. It would be great if he was able to obtain some of the materials, but he wouldn't lose anything if he couldn't. In any case, the Black Horn auction house would be the one checking for him, so he didn't need to spend time or energy on it. Khadga definitely didn't know of Lin Yun's thoughts. Otherwise, how would he have reacted? At this time, Khadga was focused on how to form the best possible relationship with Mage Merlin. It would be good if he could put up another 2 potions at the next Black Horn auction, or even make a deal to produce potions for each auction in the future. The influence of the Black Horn auction would rise sharply. But, how can I suggest that politely? Khadga was still working his brain when suddenly, a loud sound echoed outside the reception room. Afterwards, the reception door was kicked open. That's right, not pushed, but kicked open. Master Merlin, let me see where you can run this time. Mason entered in a showy way, followed by the butler, Jonathan, as well as 8 mercenaries hired by his family, all with aggressive attitudes. Even a fool could see that they had come to look for trouble. Khadga certainly wasn't a fool, but he was in a daze after seeing their sudden entry. What kind of situation is that? And it was no wonder that Khadga was in a daze. The Black Horn auction house was one of the most powerful forces of Thousand Sails City, and Khadga himself was a high mage and a great alchemist. His reception room wasn't a place that just anyone could enter. Even someone like Solomon would knock politely before coming inside. In his 20 years here, no one had ever kicked the door to enter like Mason just did. He really kicked it. Khadga's mouth was half open for a long time, before he finally processed the fact that the door to his reception room had truly been kicked open. For some time, Khadga didn't know how to react. He looked at Mason, then looked at Lin Yun. His previously politely smiling face replaced by a stunned expression. Mason didn't bother looking around and directly walked toward Lin Yun while taking 2 glass bottles out from his pocket. Hey, Master Merlin, are you hungry? No, but it sounds like you are. Lin Yun touched his nose, thinking that if there was ever a competition to show one's boldness, Mason would definitely get first place. He was way too audacious to even kick open the door to Khadga's reception room. Who else would dare to do that? Still not acknowledging your wrongdoings? Mason waved his hand, and the mercenaries immediately came in. Sounds of swords being unsheathed could be heard as the mercenaries encircled Lin Yun. What the hell are you doing? When he heard the sounds of weapons being drawn, Khadga suddenly woke up from his daze. Khadga's expression suddenly sank. As the chief auctioneer, He never thought that anyone in Thousand Sails City would dare to openly pull out weapons in his reception room. "Old man, you'd better mind your own business. Provoking this young master isn't advisable. I might also ask you to eat 2 glass bottles." Mason wasn't paying attention as he threatened Khadgar while walking past him. As he continued past, he still muttered to Jonathan in a low voice, "That old man looks a bit familiar." Chapter 43, Enough. This chapter is updated by Novels.pl. Mason had attended the auction, so normally, there should be no way for him to not recognize Khadgar. But, Mason only had himself to blame. He had been fidgeting in his seat the entire time while waiting for the auction to end, and his eyes weren't on the auction stage at all. His thoughts had been filled with his plans to deal with Lin Yan, to the point that he actually failed to recognize the one that had been conducting the auction. Is this how Monchai educates his son? Khadgar looked grimly at Mason, repressed anger hidden behind his cold voice. Although he did not get up, the High Mage's unique pressure filled the reception room, making it feel like a mountain was crushing them. The swirling mana felt like a tornado as even the books in the bookshelves flew out. "Are the noble guests of the Black Horn auction house people that you can embarrass?" Khadgar stood up among the swirling pages. He raised his hand and the 8 weapons flew out of the mercenaries' hands one after the other, sticking themselves to the wall of the reception room. The sound emitted was so piercing that everyone felt their ears go numb. "Old man, you dare to make a move on someone of the Monchai family?" Facing this sudden unforeseen event, Mason was terrified. He was still holding the 2 glass bottles in his hands, but his legs had already gone soft and he couldn't move. He could only use his mouth to appear powerful. But before he could say more, he was pulled back by Jonathan. Young master. He is Khadgar," as he explained, his head slowly lowered, and once he was done, he didn't even dare to raise it again. "What about Khadgar? Does Khadgar dare to make a move on someone of the Monchai family?" Mason reflexively demanded. But just after he finished his sentence, his face froze and he stuttered, Khadgar?" Mason might have not paid attention to Khadgar's appearance, but that didn't mean that Mason had never heard about him. Who didn't know of Khadgar in Thousand Sails City? He was the chief auctioneer of the Black Horn auction house, a high mage, and a great alchemist. Even if Mason was a fool, he knew what the name Khadgar meant. Of course it would be like this. Mason stood there in a daze, still holding the 2 glass bottles in his hands, not putting them back. He was bewildered as he mumbled, "Of course, Mather Merlin is always this lucky." The scene before him was all too familiar. Mason didn't know why he was so unlucky. Every time he wanted to teach that scoundrel a lesson, something would happen. In the Sage Tower, Solon stood up for him. In the auction house's venue, Fail stood up for him. And in the auction house's box, even Solomon stood up for him. He finally managed to stop him here, but now Khadgar was standing up for him. How could he be so unlucky? Young master, quickly apologize to High Mage Khadgar. Fortunately, Jonathan reacted fast enough and hurriedly pulled Mason's sleeve to remind him this wasn't some light offense. Drawing weapons in the reception room of a High Mage and threatening his guest, this alone was enough for the entire Monchai family to suffer from the repercussions for provoking the prestige of a High Mage. Khadgar would even be justified in killing them on the spot. They had truly jumped headfirst into a disaster. It would be useless even if Monchai himself showed up. All Jonathan could do now was to hurriedly apologize, hoping that High Mage Khadgar would be magnanimous and wouldn't lower himself to argue with a nobody like himself. Otherwise, it would end up badly. Apologize? Khadgar coldly snorted. Even the temperature in the reception room suddenly plummeted, while that mountain-like pressure made it hard for the 2 men to breathe. Khadgar was truly angry this time. An esteemed High Mage's reception room was intruded upon by a group of people led by Mason, and most importantly, they pointed weapons at Mage Merlin. He was the most important guest of the Black Horn auction house, and Khadgar himself had spared no efforts to sweet-talk him in order to establish a cooperative relationship. Yet this Mason suddenly came and asked him to eat 2 glass bottles. At least he was here when they smashed their way in. Otherwise, How would Mage Merlin have ended up if he really had been forced to eat 2 glass bottles? If by any chance Mage Merlin reconsiders his deal with the Blackhorn auction house, could your Monchai family compensate us for the loss? Thinking of this possible outcome, Khadga's frightening glare became a bit colder. Hi Mage Khadga, I'm sorry, I really didn't know you were there when Mason, who had always been spoiled ever since he was a child, saw the way this High Mage looked at him. He wept as he apologized. In fact, let alone Mason, even if Monchai himself was here in this situation, his legs would also have gone soft. Crying was an obvious reaction. No matter how foolish Mason was, he knew that a High Mage was an existence he couldn't offend. In Thousand Sails City, provoking a High Mage was akin to ending one's life. Mason hadn't lived enough yet, so all he could do was beg and apologize as if his life depended on it, hoping Khadga would let him off. What use is there in apologizing to me? You offended Mage Merlin, so if you want to apologize, then apologize to Mage Merlin. It would be best if Mage Merlin is willing to forgive you. Otherwise, Khadga didn't say what would happen, but the cold voice and grim expression terrified Mason. At this time, Mason couldn't care about the former grudges and directly forgot about the matter of the 2 glass bottles. Mage Merlin, I am wrong, I made a mistake. Stop. Lin Yun directly raised his hand, interrupting Mason's performance. This show was a lot inferior to Fail's. Originally, Lin Yun didn't want to have to pass judgment on Mason's life and death. But Lin Yun knew that Khadga definitely felt embarrassed right now, so he needed to address the matter, and he still needed to give some face to Monchai. Their family had 2 sons, and if he callously got rid of one, how could the Monchai family accept it? The same was true if Khadga directly chose to kill him. But Mason had truly committed a grave offense, so it would be inexcusable if he didn't give an apology. Thus, Khadga's earlier words had been said in order to hand the authority over Mason's punishment to Lin Yun. If Lin Yun was willing to let Mason off, then Khadga wouldn't offend either side. If he wasn't willing to let Mason off, Khadga would most likely clench his teeth and get rid of the kid, but in that case he would owe Khadga. If Khadga offended the huge Monchai family for him, how would Lin Yun be able to refuse a special request in the future? That old geezer was too sly. Lin Yun inwardly cursed him, but he didn't plan to owe such a favor. Young Master Mason might have a small misunderstanding with me, nothing too serious. High Mage Khadga, if you have time, please help me straighten him out. It's not good to let such misunderstandings linger. There are matters waiting for me at the Gilded Rose, so I'll go first. Mage Merlin truly doesn't have time to stay a while longer. The truly is something. Really, Lin Yun firmly declined Khadga's invitation and took the 4 materials he bought, as well as the crystal card, before leaving Khadga's reception room. But just as he was about to leave, Lin Yun recalled something and turned around. Oh right, High Mage Khadga, if you have time, please confirm for me that young Master Mason ate the 2 glass bottles. Afterwards, Lin Yun returned to the Gilded Rose and went into the alchemy laboratory. As the sun slowly fell, Lin Yun melted the frozen dragon blood and a drop of the precious blood was dripped into a beaker. At that instant, an azure mist rose up and an intoxicating aura spread through the laboratory. Done. Lin Yun wiped the sweat off his forehead and looked at the azure ripples in the beaker with a rare expression of happiness on his face. This was the mana baptism. Mana baptism could be thought of as shedding one's skin to reach a higher level, like a caterpillar turning into a butterfly. At the peak of the magic civilization, every newborn kid would have to undergo a mana baptism. Not only would that mana baptism allow them to gather mana for the first time, but it would also thoroughly improve their constitution. Thus, in that era, nearly everyone was a talented mage. What determined one's degree of success would be their effort and luck. In fact, it was a bit late for Lin Yun to use the mana baptism, as that first accumulation of mana wasn't essential to him. The only really useful part was the improvement to his constitution. But this was exactly what the current Lin Yun needed. The flaws in Matha's body were too serious. It was so serious that even advancing to become a mage had been problematic. Fortunately, it was Lin Yun who had taken over the body. Anyone else, including the original person, would have remained forever as a magic apprentice. The only way to settle that kind of flaw was this bottle of mana baptism. Chapter 44, troubles. This chapter is updated by novels.pl. Now I should prepare to advance to the great mage rank. Lin Yun composed himself and drank the bottle of mana baptism that he had just prepared. He felt the scalding liquid pour down his throat as he remained aware of every change happening throughout his body. Lin Yun estimated that the change would continue for 3 days. Over the course of these 3 days, the mana baptism would gradually improve his body and the problem of lacking mana sustenance would slowly disappear. When this was over, this body's potential for magic wouldn't be inferior to that of any contemporary genius. At that time, advancing to become a great mage wouldn't be an issue. Because of the effect of the mana baptism, Lin Yun couldn't use too much magic for these 3 days. He would even have to stop his daily meditation. Thus, after Lin Yun left the laboratory, he didn't directly return home for the meditation, but rather, he went to take a look at the Gilded Rose. At the moment, the business of the Gilded Rose was still in the hands of the old butler. Besides occasionally compounding a few potions, Lin Yun almost never got involved in the business operations of the Gilded Rose. The old butler actually didn't complain about this because he knew that the young master had always been determined to become a mage ever since he was little. After fainting, he lost himself in the magic world, and thus, the old man had always been very careful to not disturb him. If he met any troubles, he would figure out a way to solve them on his own. The Gilded Rose reaching its present state was at least 80% due to the contributions of the old butler. Lin Yun couldn't help thinking that the old butler truly was very skilled when it came to business. When the Gilded Rose restarted its operations, all their assets only added up to a few tens of thousands, but in only 3 months, the Gilded Rose had earned over 300,000 gold. And that wasn't including the stored goods. If those items were sold immediately, they would add another 100,000 gold. The most important product was the downgraded version of the mana baptism. It was dubbed as the Hope Potion by the old butler and was the biggest undisclosed trump card. If the Hope Potion was brought out, it would inevitably create a stir in Thousand Sails City, and every magic apprentice would go crazy. A potion that allowed a magic apprentice to easily reach 9th rank. It was quite obvious that the price of such potions would be frightening. Back at that time, Lockmerlin had been unable to purchase this kind of potion. It was evident from this how expensive such a potion would be. But the Gilded Rose was different. Now, the Gilded Rose had a total of over 30 hope potions, and each bottle could create a 9th rank magic apprentice. With such a large stock, if they wanted to sell all of it, they wouldn't be able to sell them at too high of a price. The old butler estimated that the most suitable price was 200,000 gold per bottle. Ordinary magic apprentices definitely wouldn't be able to afford a hope potion. And thus, the true customers were the children of the most influential people in Thousand Sails City. Many of them were the same as the original Mappa, ambitious with regards to magic, but without the necessary talent. Although a hope potion couldn't make them become mages, becoming a 9th rank magic apprentice was a huge temptation. After saving the time that would normally be needed to reach the 9th rank, they could slowly take their time or try to think of another way to bridge the final gap. With this kind of potential customer, the price definitely couldn't be too low. If the price was marked at 10 or 20,000 gold per bottle, people might think that there was an issue with the potion. But too high a price wouldn't work either. There weren't many people who would spend several hundred thousands or even $1 million to cultivate a 9th rank magic apprentice. In the end, perhaps only 3 or 4 customers would make a purchase. So 3 or 4 bottles would sell in that case, but what about the remaining ones? Would they be left for the old butler to drink? Thus, the old butler thought for a long time before setting the temporary price at 200,000 gold. Lin Yun didn't express any opinion on this. On one hand, the old butler had always been in charge of the Gilded Rose, so he had a greater understanding of the market than anyone else. On the other hand, Lin Yun didn't pay much attention to the 30 bottles of help potions. Because the Gilded Rose had just started, Lin Yun had to personally compound potions for sale, but once the Gilded Rose was on a good track, he would definitely not spend time on that anymore. A mage's time was too valuable, he couldn't waste it. Lin Yun thought of this as he entered the Gilded Rose. Today was the first day of the month, the day that the Mercenary Guild provided missions, and also the best day for the Gilded Rose. When the mercenaries got new quests, they would naturally make preparations, and although the Gilded Rose in the Victorious Return Main Street wasn't the best such store yet, it still was one of the best. Under the management of the old butler, the Gilded Rose had already slowly recovered its splendor. Among the numerous stores of Thousand Sales City, it should be among the top 10, and it had the superior advantage of being located in the Victorious Return Street. After choosing their new missions, most of the mercenaries would choose to go to the Gilded Rose, which was only a street away from the Mercenary Guild. But today, after Lin Yun came to the Gilded Rose, he felt something wrong. The business was good, there were many people, and the clerks were busy, but Lin Yun felt that something wasn't quite right. After thinking about it for a moment, he noticed that old butler wasn't there. That wouldn't be strange on any other day, but it was currently the first day of the month, the best day for the Gilded Rose. Lin Yun clearly remembered that every month, the old butler would definitely oversee the Gilded Rose on this day, even back when Lock Merlin was around. Why wasn't he here today? The more Lin Yun thought about it, the stranger he felt the situation was. Could a problem have come up? Remy, come here. As he thought of it, Lin Yun couldn't refrain from checking on the matter, so he beckoned Remy over. Boss, how come you came? When Remy saw Lin Yun, he hurriedly handed all of his workload to another clerk and ran over. I came to take a look. Oh, by the way, Remy, do you know where Uncle Pave went? I heard that Boss Pave went out early in the morning to retrieve a batch of magic materials. Went out early in the morning? Lin Yun frowned when he heard this. There had always been someone appointed to retrieve the Gilded Rose's materials. Even if they had their hands full and old Pave went to retrieve them instead, it still shouldn't take that long. Enough time had passed for him to make a few trips. So how could he still not be back yet? Where did he go to retrieve the materials? It seems Remy thought about it, before saying with a bit of uncertainty, it seems to be at the Frost Wolf Mercenary Group. The Frost Wolf Mercenary Group? Lin Yun nodded and lowered his head. The Frost Wolf Mercenary Group wasn't that big. It only had 20 people, and their fame and strength were far inferior compared to the colossal Silver Moon. But they had been cooperating well with the Gilded Rose these past few months. The materials they harvested were mostly sold to the Gilded Rose, and the price was relatively fair. The old butler had boasted about the arrangement a few times. At first, Lin Yun was worried when he heard that the old butler had personally gone to pick up materials, but since it was the Frost Wolf Mercenary Group, it was unlikely that there were any problems. Thus, Lin Yun didn't ask again and only looked around the store a bit more. The business was really good and everyone was lively. Lin Yun thought that since he couldn't undergo his usual meditation, he would simply help the alchemists who were at work. After the Gilded Rose reopened for business, they recruited 4 alchemists. They all had pretty decent abilities, and because the alchemy laboratory had been occupied by Lin Yun, the old butler opened up the second floor for them. Now, these 4 alchemists, as well as the several dozens of apprentice alchemists acting as helpers, were working hard in this new alchemy laboratory. Lin Yun had never shown his alchemy abilities in front of these 4 alchemists, but some occasional exchanges made them aware that this young boss wasn't ignorant in the field of alchemy. Thus, they actually welcomed Lin Yun's help, but they didn't dare to give the most important work to him. They only gave him some simple work such as enchanting. Lin Yun wasn't disappointed, as he was only there to pass time anyways. Noon quickly passed, and when evening arrived, the lively Gilded Rose slowly emptied out. The mercenaries took their supplies and left the Gilded Rose while the clerks started cleaning and tidying up everything as they got ready to end the day. The alchemists completed their work for the day, and after greeting Lin Yun, they were getting ready to return home. Lin Yun chatted with a few of the alchemists while walking down the stairs. At that time, he caught sight of an anxious butler walking over. "Young master, you came?" The old butler was clearly surprised at Lin Yun's appearance. "I was staying at home with nothing to do, so I thought that I might as well come and take a look." "Oh, right, I heard from Remy that you went to the Frost Wolf Mercenaries to get a batch of ingredients. Did everything go smoothly?" This at the mention of this topic, The old butler's expression suddenly seemed rather bitter. "Young master, I think we might be in trouble." "Eh?" "We had already arranged to buy that batch of materials, but I went at dawn today and they told me that it had already been sold to others. I was a bit suspicious then, but afterwards, I went to several groups that had pretty good business relations with us, and after walking all day, almost all the groups told me that their materials had already been sold to others." "They all said that?" "Yes. They all said that." Chapter 45, Partnership. This chapter is updated by Novels.pl. The old butler sighed after answering. For the Gilded Rose, which had just recovered, this was truly a devastating hit. It would still be manageable if it was only the Frost Wolf mercenaries, but there were about 10 businesses often cooperating with the Gilded Rose in the past which were now all saying that they had sold out of materials. This was quite serious, cutting off the supplies required for the Gilded Rose to operate as an alchemy shop. If they lost their supply of materials, they would definitely be heading straight for a dead end. No matter how brilliant an alchemist was, it was impossible to make products out of nothing. If they couldn't find a new source to supply their resources, even if the Gilded Rose struggled as hard as possible, they would ultimately end up bankrupt. "Don't worry, I'll go out tomorrow and see if I can find another supplier for these materials," the old butler said after thinking about it. He couldn't come up with any good solution. Ultimately, he decided that he would get in touch with the lowest mercenary group and contact a few more businesses to see whether they could gather some materials to survive the crisis facing them. "No need." Lin Yan shook his head. He clearly understood the old butler's train of thought, but the lowest mercenary groups all consisted of weaklings, and the missions they could accomplish were worth a few hundred gold at best. It was simply impossible for them to gather many important materials. Even if the old butler was lucky and managed to get in touch with a few businesses, it probably still wouldn't amount to what the Frost Wolf mercenaries usually supplied. And let alone those minor mercenaries, Lin Yan wasn't even very satisfied with the Frost Wolf mercenaries either. After developing the Gilded Rose, there was a need for a new supplier. As for who this new supplier was, Lin Yan had already thought of this matter in the Black Horn auction house, but he had yet to come to a conclusion, so he hadn't let the old butler know of his thoughts on the matter. The incident with the Frost Wolf mercenaries today gave Lin Yan the perfect opportunity. "You don't need to worry about this matter. I'll go out and find a new supplier for the Gilded Rose tomorrow. How about I accompany you?" The old butler wasn't too reassured. Even a fool would notice that someone was targeting the Gilded Rose based on the day's events. The Frost Wolf mercenaries, who had always been on good terms with them, were acting like this. Finding a new supplier wasn't something that could be solved with just a few sentences. "No need, no need, you look after the shop." After seeing the old butler off, Lin Yan returned to the alchemy laboratory. The next morning, at dawn, Lin Yan went to the Lion Monarch Street in the southern part of the city. If the Victorious Return Street was classified as part of the Mage Guild, then the Lion Monarch Street was within the influence of the mercenaries. Of the 10 top mercenary groups of Thousand Sails City, 7 of them were stationed in the Lion Monarch Street, which included the one ranked at the forefront, the Silver Moon mercenaries. The ones Lin Yan came to look for today were precisely the Silver Moon mercenaries. The person who received Lin Yan was a deputy leader called Marco. With Lin Yan's current status, sending a deputy leader to receive him was already too much. If it had been some ordinary mage, let alone a deputy leader, even a deputy captain would be considered pretty good. But the problem was that Lin Yan didn't come here to meet a deputy leader this time. Nothing could be done about it, as the business he had with the mercenary group wasn't something that a deputy leader could make a decision on. Thus, after exchanging greetings, Lin Yan directly requested to have a chat with Leader Sasu. Once he said that, Deputy Leader Marco's face suddenly no longer looked friendly. To be honest, this couldn't be blamed on him. Here was a 20-year-old mage with no support that only owned an alchemy shop, and they had already sent a deputy leader for him, out of respect for his dead father. But that wasn't enough. That young mage wanted to meet the leader himself for a chat. "Is Leader Sasu someone you can meet, let alone you?" Even people at the peak of Thousand Sails City like Monchai of the Twin Moons Chamber of Commerce or Sasu of the Viper Nest would have to notify us ahead of time before being able to meet Leader Sasu. Leader Sasu isn't here. Marco's words weren't as polite as before. But Lin Yun didn't take offense and only smiled before whispering, "It's about the ghost potion." I said, "Leader Sasu isn't here, what about the ghost potion?" Marco gave Lin Yun an impatient look, intending to say a few unpleasant words to drive back this young mage who thought too highly of himself, when he suddenly realized what the young mage had just said. "Fuck, it's about the ghost potion?" Marco panicked and almost bit his tongue. Ghost potion, you just said. Ghost potion? Yes, ghost potion. Sorry for my words. Excuse me, I must leave. After the deputy leader confirmed that he hadn't misheard, he immediately stood up and left the reception room. Afterwards, Sasu came in. Lin Yun's conversation with Sasu lasted only 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, Lin Yun left the camp of the Silver Moon mercenaries and returned to the Gilded Rose. The old butler didn't even know that Lin Yun had gone to the Silver Moon mercenaries. But that short 10-minute conversation quickly brought a significant shock to Thousand Sails City. One day later, Sasu publicly announced two things. First, the Silver Moon mercenaries would march for Edgerift at the start of the next month and eliminate the rock trolls that had been occupying the place for 100 years, thus reopening the golden trade route between Thousand Sails City and Angel Coast. Second, the Silver Moon mercenaries and the Gilded Rose had established an official partnership. The partnership involved a few fields, including the supply of magic materials, the purchase of alchemy items, the sharing of all kinds of techniques, and even the establishment of a joint armed caravan. The announcement of these two decisions by Sasu immediately alarmed the entire Thousand Sails City. The matter of the annihilation of the rock trolls wasn't a problem, as this was a quest that the Chambers of Commerce had jointly poured money into to offer a reward at the Mercenary Guild for 100 years. In the past dozen years, the Silver Moon mercenaries had slowly reached the peak of Thousand Sails City. Many people had realized that sooner or later, the Silver Moon mercenaries would head to Edgerift to finish the task and claim the bounty. Because once this 100-year-old quest was cleared, the prestige of the Silver Moon mercenaries would inevitably reach new heights. Ultimately, they would even rise to become one of the mercenary groups at the peak of the kingdom. Although the decision seemed somewhat hurried, it was still within everyone's expectations. But the second announcement baffled everyone. Why would the esteemed Silver Moon mercenaries choose an alchemy shop as their business partner? Even if the predecessor of this alchemy store was Thousand Sails City's flashing gold Chamber of Commerce, that was only its predecessor. The only things that remained of the Gilded Rose were an old man and a youth, 4 alchemists, and a few dozen apprentice alchemists. This was the entire Gilded Rose. So how could they become the Silver Moon mercenaries' business partner, and a close business partner at that? This was like tying the Silver Moon mercenaries to the Gilded Rose. Whoever dared to offend the Gilded Rose in the future would have to think about the Silver Moon mercenaries' reaction. In fact, there was no need to wait for the future, because there was someone already thinking about it right now. This was the leader of the Frost Wolf mercenaries, Andrew. The Frost Wolf mercenaries also had their camp in the southern part of the city, on the Lion Monarch Street. The news of the partnership between the Silver Moon mercenaries and the Gilded Rose quickly reached Andrew's ears. When he heard about it, Andrew turned pale from fear. Others might not know why the Gilded Rose had sought out the Silver Moon mercenaries, but how could Andrew not know about it? Wasn't it because the Frost Wolf mercenaries had stopped supplying the Gilded Rose with magic materials? At first, the Frost Wolf mercenaries had always had a pleasant cooperation with the Gilded Rose, but a few days ago, an influential person had approached them and asked Andrew to stop supplying the Gilded Rose. Furthermore, they paid adequately, so Andrew hadn't thought much of it and just straightforwardly agreed. Why were mercenaries willing to risk their lives? Wasn't it to earn more gold? Since this person brought plenty of gold, what reason did he have to refuse? Moreover, the Gilded Rose wasn't a powerful client that they couldn't afford to offend. In the past, Andrew might have had to think about it some more. After all, the flashing gold Chamber of Commerce had quite a bit of power. But it wasn't the case now. Loch Merlin had died, and the flashing gold chamber of commerce already fell behind. Only a son and a butler remained. Even if he tore apart the contract, would they even be able to retaliate? Thus, Andrew didn't spend much time thinking about it and agreed to stop supplying the Gilded Rose. And now, a problem had arisen out of this. No one ever thought that the Gilded Rose would actually look for the Silver Moon mercenaries, and furthermore, that the Silver Moon mercenaries would actually agree to cooperate with them. This was really huge. Sassu was called the Mercenary King of Thousand Sails City. His prestige among the mercenaries was so high that an average person wouldn't even be able to imagine it. It was to the point that with a simple word from Sassu, the Frost Wolf mercenaries could become the public enemy of all mercenaries within Thousand Sails City. Even Andrew's own subordinates would turn against him. Thinking about this, Andrew couldn't help turning pale. What should I do? Chapter 46. Chuckle. This chapter is updated by novels.pl. Andrew spent a few days in a state of constant fear. Even when sleeping at night, he would frequently be awakened by nightmares, afraid that when he woke up, he would have already become a public enemy of Thousand Sails City. After spending 3 days in such torment, Andrew became thin and pallid, and many of his hairs whitened. On the 4th day, Andrew didn't keep to himself any longer and he went to the victorious main street. He waited an entire afternoon at the Gilded Rose's entrance. He waited till the evening, when he saw Lin Yun coming from his home. Good evening, Mage Merlin. After waiting for all this time, Andrew was cold and hungry. But when he saw Lin Yun, he hurriedly put on a smiling face to greet him. Good evening, Leader Andrew. Lin Yun didn't stop, only turning and nodding as he passed, as he considered it to be a simple greeting. But the problem was that Andrew didn't come today only to greet him. Thus, Andrew had no choice but to catch up to Lin Yun and put on his smiling face once again as he started. Well, Mage Merlin, the Gilded Rose's business seems to be really good. Lin Yun only chuckled in response. At first, Andrew had planned to bring up the topic of the shop doing well to move on to the matter of the magic materials. After getting on that subject, Andrew would seize the opportunity to offer to continue their previous collaboration. At worst, he would admit his mistake. What was losing face compared to being driven away from Thousand Sails City by Sassu? But Lin Yun only chuckled. This chuckle made it very difficult for Andrew. How should he reply to this? How could he take advantage of this? Esteemed mage, please don't toy with me. Lin Yun wasn't actually toying with him. Since he established a partnership with the Silver Moon mercenaries, he had many matters waiting for him to settle. In the past few days, Lin Yun had been busy running around, so how could he still have time to toy with someone he barely knew? After answering with a chuckle, he continued walking toward the entrance of the Gilded Rose. Mage Merlin, please wait. Andrew didn't look good as he hurriedly chased after Lin Yun. Is there something wrong, Leader Andrew? Lin Yun stopped and sized up Andrew, feeling a bit surprised. Cold sweat trickled down Andrew's back. If he could, Andrew would have asked, do I freaking look okay to you? I ran to the Gilded Rose and waited the whole afternoon, into the evening. Now I'm cold and starving. Do you really think I'm idle and have nothing better to do? But thinking of the possible consequences, Andrew didn't dare to say such things. And not only did he not dare to complain, but he also did his best to pull on a fawning smile. Yes, Mage Merlin, I came over today to ask, does the Gilded Rose still need magic materials? Our Frost Wolf mercenary group recently did a few missions and gathered quite an amount of materials. I wonder if the Gilded Rose would like to help us dispose of it. In reality, the Frost Wolf mercenaries hadn't actually gathered such materials. But now isn't the time to say that. In order to ease the tension with the Gilded Rose, no matter how harsh the conditions were, Andrew could only endure and buy the materials from the marketplace later on, probably at a loss. There is no problem in helping you dispose of them, but Leader Andrew, the funds of the Gilded Rose are quite lacking lately, so I might have to apologize to you about the price. I'll go talk to Uncle Pavan, then we will proceed with helping you dispose of the materials. We will even give you 50% of their value as a symbolic gesture. 50%? Andrew almost stopped breathing. If he could, Andrew would have loved to spit in Lin Yun's face. This truly was too shameless. He had already lowered himself and looked around for him, eventually waiting an entire afternoon. Despite being cold and hungry, he spoke politely and smiled, but in the end, Merlin asked him for a 50% discount, and he even called it a symbolic gesture. Fuck your symbolic gesture. Andrew struggled for a long time before finally swallowing hard. There was nothing he could do about it, as he was clearly being taken advantage of by Merlin, who had become the partner of the Silver Moon mercenaries. If he said something wrong, even if he didn't do anything, as long as Merlin pouted about it in front of Sassu, Andrew would have to deal with the consequences. Calm. I must remain calm. Andrew took a deep breath and secretly shed a tear as he did his best to maintain his stiff smile. In that case, thank you, Mage Merlin. You're welcome. Lin Yun then politely excused himself before turning to enter the Gilded Rose. Andrew stood there lifelessly. That "you're welcome" felt like a slap to his face. Lin Yun really didn't care about what Andrew thought, because Lin Yun had more important matters at hand. 3 days had passed, and the mana baptism had already transformed his body, so Lin Yun would no longer be bothered by the flaws of the body that Mappa Merlin had left behind. In other words, Lin Yun could attack the Great Mage Realm anytime. That was why he had come to the Gilded Rose. The alchemy laboratory of the Gilded Rose was a place that Lin Yun carefully organized. 3 magic traps were set up in the corridor. He didn't spare any mana on the entrance as he solidified 2 mage eyes and inscribed 2 alchemy arrays on it. This kind of setup couldn't be considered well fortified, but at least ordinary mages wouldn't be able to enter. Let alone ordinary mages, even most great mages would have to ask for Lin Yun's authorization before entering. There shouldn't be anyone that would bother him while he advanced to become a great mage. After going to the Gilded Rose, Lin Yun first greeted the old butler and spoke about Andrew's matter before heading for the laboratory. After checking the traps at the entrance, he activated the alchemy array inside, and when he closed the door, he easily supplemented another mage eye. Once he was done, Lin Yun looked for a secluded place to start his longest meditation since becoming a mage. Lin Yun estimated that the meditation this time would take at least 3 days. It was completely different from ordinary meditation. Advancing to Great Mage required one to break through the limit and shatter their mana whirlpool. Only after crushing their mana whirlpool would they be able to have their own magic conducting rune. This was the most important thing for a Great Mage. To some extent, a magic conducting rune was the life imprint of a great mage. Not only did that imprint possess earth-shaking power, but it would also continuously evolve with the great mage. Thus, when preparing to advance to this rank, one would have to go through a very long meditation, during which they would have to purify their mana whirlpool. Some mages might use potions to help purify the mana whirlpool, such as the spectrum potions that Lin Yun crafted a while back, or the colorful potion Raymond once mentioned. But Lin Yun wouldn't do so. Coming from the last days of Nocent, he understood a lot more than the mages of this era. Once transformed into a magic conducting rune, a mana whirlpool that had been purified solely relying on itself would be 10 times stronger than one that had been purified through potions. Purifying a mana whirlpool was an extremely painful process, during which mages needed to extract impurities within the mana whirlpool bit by bit. To a mage, this would feel like carving out bits of themselves. The entire process was full of pain and suffering. When Lin Yun entered meditation, his mana whirlpool slowly started rotating. Time slowly passed while Lin Yun's calm face began to turn pale, and beads of sweat trickled down his forehead. And this was just the beginning. 1 day passed. 2 days passed. On the 3rd day, Lin Yun was in an extremely weak state. He was thin and pallid and emitted worrying mana fluctuations. It felt as if they might go out of control any time. But his eyes were brighter than before. Lin Yun knew that he was in the most powerful state he had ever been in since appearing in this body. The accumulation of mana reached the limit, and after the mana whirlpool was purified, it could only be described as perfect. Those somewhat worrying mana fluctuations weren't because Lin Yun couldn't control his mana, but rather because his mana whirlpool was on the brink of shattering. Lin Yun already stood at the entrance of the Great Mage Realm, and only needed a small push. After confirming his state, Lin Yun took a deep breath and slowly began to circulate the mana within his body. At the start, This mana was gentle and soothing, just like a flowing brook. Apart from its shocking purity, it was the same as ordinary meditation. But unlike an ordinary meditation session, after that mana poured into the mana whirlpool, it didn't follow the mana whirlpool's normal pathways. Instead, it silently gathered at the center of the mana whirlpool. Nothing happened at first, but as Lin Yun hastened it, a change appeared in the circulating mana, moving faster and faster. Ultimately, it turned into a surging river with thunderous, roaring waves coursing toward the center of the mana whirlpool. Originally, when Lin Yun advanced to become a mage, he used his powerful mana control to build this almost impeccable mana whirlpool. Otherwise, he wouldn't have managed to defeat the 9th rank mage of the Viper Nest so easily, nor would he have been able to forcibly use the great mage level elemental incarnation in the bone plane. But now, this almost impeccable mana whirlpool was slowly being deformed by the endless flow of mana. If this happened to another mage, they would be scared to death. It was common knowledge that a mana whirlpool needed to be stable, even when shattering it during the advancement to Great Mage. To a mage, the mana whirlpool was most important. Only when their mana whirlpool was stable enough would they be able to gather mana through meditation and transfer mana to cast spells. In Nocent, nearly every mage's first lesson to their disciples would be to cherish their mana whirlpool, because if there was a problem with their mana whirlpool, the path to magic would be severed. Chapter 47, Magic Conducting Rune. This chapter is updated by Novels.pl. Just like Solomon, the current leader of the Mage Guild who became a high mage over 20 years ago, because his mana whirlpool had been injured in a fight in an active volcano, this rare, talented high mage hadn't made any progress for over 20 years. With Solomon being stymied like this, there was no need to think about the case for an ordinary mage. Any mage who saw Lin Yun's situation would think he was courting death. But it wasn't the same for Lin Yun. He kept urging his mana, continuously expanding his mana whirlpool. The knowledge he held, the abilities he possessed, they already far surpassed what was known in this era. The magic apprentices from this era didn't dare to use mana to batter against the mana whirlpool, because this era's mages had to be careful and safe, not knowing what could cause a problem. Under the surge of mana, the mana whirlpool within Lin Yun's body quickly expanded like an inflating balloon, slowly becoming bigger and bigger, before finally, it exploded with a bang. Losing the restriction from the mana whirlpool, the mana flowing inside started going out of control. It was berserk and chaotic, bashing and shoving inside Lin Yun's body. It wasn't soothing and gentle like before. If someone else experienced the collapse of their mana whirlpool and their mana going berserk, they would likely just close their eyes and die. But this was only the beginning for Lin Yun. The berserk and chaotic mana wreaking havoc within his body felt as if 10 spells were being cast at the same time. The pain couldn't be understood if one hadn't experienced it themselves. Sweat slowly trickled down from Lin Yun's forehead. But there wasn't the slightest change in the expression on his face. Lin Yun was like an accurate machine right now. He simply remained steady and only used his powerful control to its maximum to bring each thread of mana under his command. When mana struggled free from the binding of mana whirlpool, it would become berserk and chaotic like swirling gales and large waves, eroding away every part of his body. Exercising mana control at that point would just be wishful thinking, but Lin Yun managed to do it. By relying on his fine mana control tempered through his life at the end of the magic era, Lin Yun managed to calm the mana and make it flow according to his prepared path. He completely relied on his control to create an intact mana path inside his body. Naturally, that mana path still wasn't stable, because the mana whirlpool had already collapsed. Even with Lin Yun's incredible control, he could only use time and patience to slowly wear it down. 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times. As Lin Yun gradually found it harder to endure, the berserk mana gradually became calmer. Feeling the change within his body, Lin Yun let out a sigh of relief. The most difficult part was finally dealt with, so the next thing to do was to engrave the magic conducting rune. After completing this step, Lin Yun could officially enter the ranks of great mages. Moreover, the mana within Lin Yun was still in a pure and chaotic state. As long as Lin Yun wanted, he could carve any magic conducting rune. This was an extremely rare opportunity for someone advancing to become a great mage. Among tens of thousands of mages, there might not even be one with such an opportunity. Magic conducting runes were also divided by ranks. Just like great mages, the gap between different magic conducting runes could be quite large, perhaps tenfold or more. That gap not only could be felt through the power of spells and the ability to conduct mana, but it would have a crucial impact when advancing to become a high mage. It would be 100 times easier to advance further for a great mage with a top-notch magic conducting rune. This was the reason Lin Yun was taking such great risks. Otherwise, with Lin Yun's great accumulation of mana, he would have already advanced to great mage and wouldn't have needed to be so rough with his mana whirlpool, risking a backlash. What Lin Yun wanted was to make the mana return to its primal state. Once it returned to its chaotic primal state, it would be like a piece of white paper, a blank slate. Lin Yun could freely write on it and carve any magic conducting rune. The most difficult part of the breakthrough had already been completed. All that was left was carving a rune, and Lin Yun would become a great mage. But, what kind of magic conducting rune would he carve? Lin Yun frowned. He thought for a long time before realizing that the magic conducting runes he had been considering before couldn't be used. It wasn't because he couldn't complete them, but because they were too wasteful. That's right, wasteful. Lin Yun himself hadn't thought that after the mana returned to its primal state, it would be so pure and so perfect that the magic conducting runes that he had thought of before would be subpar. In fact, as soon as he drank the mana baptism, Lin Yun had designed a few magic conducting runes, such as the Extreme Forge for strengthening casting power, Time Hand for improving casting speed, and Endless Spring for improved mana recovery. These magic conducting runes were among the most perfect ones even at the peak of the magic era, let alone in this era. Even Lin Yun himself had felt satisfied after choosing these few magic conducting runes, as he felt that these were the most powerful magic conducting runes that he could inscribe at the present time. But now, Lin Yun felt dissatisfied with them. The mana in its primal chaos state was too pure and perfect, and if he really carved these magic conducting runes, Lin Yun wouldn't be able to forgive himself for not trying to bring out his full potential. Maybe I should experiment with others'. After a slight hesitation, Lin Yun came to a decision. 1 hour later, Lin Yun appeared in the Sage Tower. The one receiving Lin Yun today was surprisingly not Solon, but Solomon. When he saw Solomon, Lin Yun was startled. This was the leader of the Sage Tower, Thousand Sails City's most powerful mage. For him to personally receive someone, they had to be on Khadga's level. Although Lin Yun had some reputation, when comparing the two, he was still quite far off. Had Solomon recently figured out more about him? This wasn't the first time Lin Yun had come to the Sage Tower. He had been here a few times and even chatted with Solon, who had told him about the temperament of the leader of the Mage Guild. He was like any other mage, engrossed in magic, not caring about most worldly matters, and occasionally irascible. But Lin Yun knew that this seemingly eccentric high mage cherished his words. He wouldn't speak if he didn't need to. What happened in the auction house box was enough to prove it, even his actions around Monchai. Normally, when Lin Yun visited the Sage Tower, he would always be received by Solon. First, their relationship was pretty good, and he could be considered one of the few friends Lin Yun had in Thousand Sails City. Second, Solon was Solomon's disciple. Him receiving Lin Yun showed Solomon's friendly attitude. But Solomon himself had never appeared personally during these visits. Solomon's appearance had a whole different meaning. This high mage represented the Sage Tower, the entire Mage Guild. For him to personally receive Lin Yun would bring a large shock to Thousand Sails City. It was equal to the shock of the Silver Moon Mercenaries' announcement, which instantly terrified Andrew of the Frost Wolf Mercenaries. If Solomon was added to the fray, who wouldn't be terrified? So what was the meaning behind his appearance today? Lin Yun didn't know if he should speak first, so he only politely exchanged conventional greetings with Solomon. Mage Merlin, this is the Hell Destroyer scroll from the Black Horn auction. According to our agreement, the Sage Tower has already finished researching it. It is yours now. Solomon handed a scroll to Lin Yun while speaking. It has only been a handful of days. Haha, as you said, Mage Merlin, I hate the Ash Tower more than you do. As for the scroll itself, I don't have much interest in it, and there is no need to spend too much time researching a badly damaged spell after copying its contents. Then I shall thank you, High Mage Solomon. Since Solomon said so, Lin Yun naturally wouldn't refuse. In any case, he intended to enter the Bone Plane once again with his advancement to Great Mage. With a spiritual augment in hand, his chances of survival would be a lot better. Good. I believe that you came to the Sage Tower today for the library, right? Indeed. Then I won't keep you any longer. Ah? Lin Yun was a bit startled when he heard this. Solomon came to the reception room himself in order to return a scroll? Wasn't that too nonsensical? Lin Yun originally thought that Solomon had personally received him to discuss some particular matters, but it would be quite odd if it was only to return the scroll. But since he had already said this, Lin Yun could only leave while full of questions, before slowly walking over to the library. On the way, Lin Yun's mind was fully focused on trying to understand the meaning behind Solomon's actions. When Lin Yun reached the library and stood in front of a row of bookshelves, his mind was still lingering on the matter, up until Solon's voice came from behind him. Merlin. What are you looking for? Solon? You also came? I'm looking for a book on the magic conducting rune creation paradigm, as well as a detailed book on the max formula. Magic conducting rune creation? Solon was taken aback as he stared at Lin Yun for a long time. His face suddenly revealed an expression of shock. You're a great mage now? Chapter 48, Magic Array. This chapter is updated by novels.pl. Yes, I just advanced. Solon stood there in a daze for a long time before he could recover from the shock. For some time, his mood was quite complicated. Thinking about it, when this young mage called Merlin came to the Sage Tower, he had just formed his mana whirlpool. He could barely be called a first-rank mage at that point. But it hadn't been a few months yet and he was already ready to engrave a magic-conducting rune, ready to step into the ranks of the great mages. When I worked to become a great mage, I spent 10 years. It wasn't bad, but compared to him, Solon wanted to curse. As he stood there, Solon very much wanted to ask whether he was a human or something else. Mage Solon. Seeing Solon being silent for such a long time while just staring, Lin Yun couldn't help calling his name twice. Nothing. After being brought back to his senses, Solon hid the grief and indignation, and in order to cover up the fact that he had forgotten himself, he promptly looked for the 2 books that Lin Yun had asked about. He was Solomon's disciple. If another mage saw such a situation, a shadow might be cast over their heart, influencing their future on the path of magic. From first-rank mage to great mage in a few months, this wasn't something a human could do. The 2 books Lin Yun was looking for weren't very rare, and after some time, Solon found them and handed them over, reminding him, I heard teacher say that this magic conducting rune creation paradigm recently stirred quite a controversy. Yes, I know. Lin Yun nodded, not going into any more detail. Magic Conducting Rune Creation Paradigm was a very controversial book. Lin Yun already knew that. In fact, some 10,000 years later, this book would be mentioned by those mages at the pinnacle, and as a textbook on what not to do, because it had way too many mistakes. But in this era, the research of the magic conducting runes was far from mature enough, so the controversy could only be felt by the mages at the top. Moreover, even they could only feel it, nothing more. No one could point out what exactly was wrong. In this era, the only one able to raise an issue was Lin Yun. Lin Yun closed his eyes and estimated the number of errors that would appear in this book. Lin Yun clearly knew why such errors would appear and how they would be corrected from his time in the decaying library. But Lin Yun didn't come to play find the differences today. The matter of finding out the mistakes would be left for the mages of the future. Lin Yun came today to find a typical magic conducting rune that had been repeatedly mentioned by those powerful mages in this book. The name of that magic conducting rune was Magic Array. Of course, this was a name that would only be attributed to this magic conducting rune 10,000 years later. In this era, people knew of that magic conducting rune as the discarded rune. or the worthless rune. The first time it was called this was in Magic Conducting Rune Creation Paradigm, where the magic array was used as a teaching example to show various negative things. The author pointed to the magic array and emphasized how important it was to build the magic array properly. If not carefully created, it would become a discarded rune later. This was also the only method for Lin Yun to build the correct magic array. Just building a magic array wasn't difficult, but managing to create a complete magic array was a whole different story. Let alone now. Even at the peak of the magic civilization, there were no more than 5 mages that had a complete magic array. Moreover, these 5 mages never passed down the magic array as their inheritance. This led to Nonsense people being unable to build the magic array after these 5 mages fell at the end of the magic era like everyone else. In other words, in the decaying library, the records of the magic array were only limited to a few descriptions without giving any real method for someone to build it. Lin Yun thought for a very long time before he managed to recall a book mentioning that the magic array was once called the Discarded Rune, and that the first time the name Discarded Rune was used was in a magic book called Magic Conducting Rune Creation Paradigm. The author was apparently a high mage from the 3rd dynasty who wasn't famous, but 10,000 years later, he was recorded in history thanks to this book. Naturally, the way he got into the pages of history was a bit strange. After Lin Yun thanked Solon, he took the 2 books and found a seat before starting to flip through the pages one by one. Lin Yun had read quite quickly, and it only took him half an hour to read Magic Conducting Rune Creation Paradigm, and sure enough, it was full of mistakes. Lin Yun read through it once and found at least 20 major errors, unimaginable for a magic book. After all, magic was a strict art, and any mistake would lead to an entirely different result. For 20 mistakes to go undiscovered in all that Lin Yun had seen in his lifetime, only Magic Conducting Rune Creation Paradigm was like this. Fortunately, Lin Yun wasn't interested in those mistakes, so he immediately disregarded them after noticing. The only thing Lin Yun was looking for was the way to build the magic array. Amusingly enough, the book's only valuable information was the one thing the author spent the whole book ridiculing and exhorting the readers not to do. Some of his words were even very rude, saying that the great mages that built this discarded rune would have very limited accomplishments in their lifetimes. Unfortunately, this author wasn't aware that 10,000 years later, the research on magic conducting runes would slowly mature, and after a complete system was set up, the discarded rune he spoke of would start to shine and be referred to as one of the most powerful runes, even giving great mages the ability to contend against high mages. But now, the magic array was truly called the Discarded Rune. Because the research of magic runes was too poor in this era, it was far from having grown enough, and many high mages and archmages would rely on their experiences to explain magic conducting runes to their disciples. The magic conducting runes they talked about each existed on their own, and although there were some relations drawn between them, they were unable to form a complete system. In this situation, the magic array was truly no different from being a discarded rune. In order to display the might of the magic array, one needed at least 6 magic conducting runes. With the magic array at the core of these 6 magic conducting runes, a great mage would be able to contend against a high mage. There was no need for external power, as one's mana itself would be enough to surpass the limitations of a rank and directly match up against a high mage. Because it was like that, the magic array was known as one of the most powerful magic conducting runes. And what Lin Yun wanted to build right now was exactly this magic array system. Lin Yun took out his own magic book and copied every line of the complete magic array, line after line. After he was done, Lin Yun put down his quill and closed Magic Conducting Rune Creation Paradigm, as he was digesting the knowledge it contained. Half an hour later, Lin Yun opened the other book. The other book was called Explanations of the Max Formula. This book came from the end of the 3rd dynasty. Although from the name, it seemed to have been written by the archmage known as the Flame Tyrant, in reality, this book had been written by one of his disciples. From the point of view of a disciple, he analyzed Max's entire magic system and conducted a large amount of battle analysis. It could be said that the analysis of this archmage's fire magic was thorough to the extreme. This book was quite popular in this era, as many great mages and high mages hoped to be able to gain insight from the Flame Tyrant's magic system. It was also the case for Lin Yun. For Lin Yun, Explanations of the Max Formula could be said to be one of the rare good books of this era. In that spacious decaying library, Lin Yun had seen many books mentioning this book, but he hadn't had the chance to see it in person until he found about it from the management of the Sage Towers library. Naturally, what Lin Yun wanted wasn't insight on control over fire magic. There were many such opportunities in the decaying library. Max was the name of the Flame Tyrant, who was only an archmage. In the decaying library, many books had been left by heaven mages, or mages above even that rank. What Lin Yun really wanted was among the fight descriptions. If Lin Yun wasn't wrong, Flame Tyrant Max was born near Ghost City, which was known as the Paradise of the Undead. That place was even more frightening than the Bone Plane. Although the undead of the Bone Plane might rampage around, the strongest one was only a bone dragon. But Ghost City wasn't inferior to the Bone Plane. The Century Undead Tide was a great disaster that all of Noscent faced. Max was born in such a place, so it was inevitable that he would spend his life fighting the undead. Because of this, he was able to get high accomplishment in fire magic. Apart from holy magic, what the undead feared the most were flames. Lin Yun wanted to read the descriptions of Max's battles against the undead, and it would be even better if he had fought a bone devil when he was young. Chapter 49, Exhibition. This chapter is updated by novels.pl. Thus, Lin Yun very carefully read Explanations of the Max Formula. He was turning through the pages far slower than he had been when he browsed Magic Conducting Rune Creation Paradigm. As Lin Yun would soon enter the Bone Plane, every battle that Max fought against the undead was worthy of his attention, even if they weren't bone devils. Nothing guaranteed that after Lin Yun put an end to the bone devils and occupied the Nether Iron Vein, he wouldn't come across other kinds of undead. While Lin Yun was conscientiously browsing through Explanations of the Max Formula, Solon suddenly looked toward the entrance of the library as a shadow flashed past. After some time, someone beckoned to him from the entrance. Solon suddenly shook, as that person was clearly Solomon. Why would an esteemed high mage act like a thief? Solon came out of the library, filled with questions. When he arrived at the door, he was pulled aside by Solomon, who asked, "Is that person reading Magic Conducting Rune Creation Paradigm?" "Yes." "What's wrong?" Solon felt a bit strange. Someone reading Magic Conducting Rune Creation Paradigm shouldn't gather so much attention from a high mage. "It's not important." "Don't mind it, you leave first." Seeing that Solon wanted to ask a question, Solomon hurriedly waved his hand and drove his only disciple away. How could he tell his disciple that he had only come to the library to find out the young mage's opinion on Magic Conducting Rune Creation Paradigm? He wouldn't be able to keep his prestige as a teacher if he did. This seemed very ridiculous. An esteemed high mage coming to the library while sneaking like a thief to try to find out what a young mage thought of a particular book. If this spread out, who would believe it? But the problem was that it really was the case. Recently, the mages of the kingdom had been fervently discussing those 4 pieces of information that he had submitted. That information might likely prove the Fanru's and Formula's mistakes. It was just that these mages still only knew that this information had come from the Mage Guild of Thousand Sails City, from the disciple of Star Sage Dewey, Solomon. But Solomon knew that this had all come from a young mage named Mather Merlin that was about 20 years old. He had been a failure of a magic apprentice that was unable to form his mana whirlpool a few months ago. But Solomon never said anything publicly. It wasn't because Solomon wanted to take credit for proving the mistakes of the Fanrus and Formula, but rather because Solomon knew that even if he explained the truth, no one would believe it. The facts were too strange and ridiculous. If 10 people heard it, then all 10 of them would consider it a joke. Let alone others, even Solomon, who had experienced it himself, didn't dare to believe it. For this reason, he probed the young mage's breadth of knowledge during the Black Horn auction. In the Sage Towers box, the two had a long discussion. At that time, Solomon didn't show anything on his face. but his mind was already in shock. Solomon had realized that this young mage was a person who could actually discuss magic with him on a deep level. Although Solomon took the initiative to bring up the topic, wanting to probe him by any means, the other side seemed to know what he was trying to do, and would be careful not to overdo it. But he was able to reach the core of any topic with just a few sentences. Indeed, it was that kind of feeling. No matter how complicated or challenging the topic was, it felt as if that young mage only needed a few words to make it sound much more understated, to the point that it even made Solomon feel the misconception that the topics he chose were that simple. But once Solomon returned and thought carefully about it, he was startled. These weren't topics that could be casually understood and solved. Even he himself, as a respected high mage, would need a few years or perhaps even a dozen years to solve all of them, yet that young mage was able to grasp the key points. Solomon remembered very clearly that when he asked some questions, that young mage seemed a bit absent-minded, but when he started talking, it hit the core of the matter. That felt like a kind of frightening instinct, a subconscious action. That discovery made Solomon feel a chill. Starting from that moment, Solomon truly believed that the answer to the Phanerozen formula had come from this young mage, and wasn't just something he had overheard. Right now, it was the same library and the same young mage, along with a controversial, millennium-old book. Solomon really wanted to know what that young mage thought of the magic conducting rune creation paradigm. Unfortunately, Solomon was disappointed. After making a copy of the method to build the magic array, Lin Yun put down magic conducting rune creation paradigm, and started browsing through explanations of the max formula instead. This made it very awkward for Solomon, who had been waiting outside the door all this time. What should I do? Solomon waited for a long time, but Lin Yun never put down the second book to return to the first one. The high mage couldn't help but inwardly curse, irrationally blaming Lin Yun for deliberately going against him. Solomon was very clear about the contents of explanations of the max formula. It gave insights on the Flame Tyrant's fire magic. But there wasn't much special content, as it mostly consisted of some practical descriptions of his fights. Solomon had once described it as very entertaining. Normally, a very entertaining magic book like this shouldn't be read so earnestly, as there was little knowledge to actually glean from it. But this time, Lin Yun was being wronged. The reason Lin Yun could be so conscientious wasn't the Flame Tyrant's insights on fire magic control, as Lin Yun had already researched fire magic control quite thoroughly 10 years ago. Even if this Flame Tyrant was still alive, he would be utterly inferior to Lin Yun in theoretical knowledge. What Lin Yun was researching was the description of real battles. To be exact, the battles between the Flame Tyrant and the undead. After all, the one who wrote this book was the disciple of the Flame Tyrant. The battles that the Flame Tyrant had been experienced by the author. This kind of personal experience was most important to Lin Yun, especially the battle against a bone devil. Explanations of the max formula recorded a total of 2 fights against bone devils. In the first one, the Flame Tyrant had already advanced to High Mage and completely obliterated a dozen bone devils. The other one was when the Flame Tyrant was only a 5th rank Great Mage and met a roaming bone devil outside Ghost City. It was a fierce battle that time. Usually, a bone devil's fighting strength was between level 15 to level 19, which was equivalent to a 5th to 9th rank Great Mage. At that time, the author of the book had just started following the Flame Tyrant and had personally experienced that battle. According to his memories, the bone devil that the Flame Tyrant met that time was already approaching the level of a high mage, but the Flame Tyrant used almost all his cards and ultimately faced the danger of a backlash by using a spiritual magic tool before finally managing to get rid of the bone devil. That fight was also one of the most dangerous fights of his whole life. Such a dangerous battle naturally left a profound impression in the mind of his follower, and the description of this battle was exceptionally detailed. What made Lin Yun pleasantly surprised was that this disciple ultimately mentioned that when the Flame Tyrant recalled that battle many years afterwards, he reflected upon it and listed a few mistakes he had made, and even claimed that if he hadn't made those mistakes, he might not have needed to use his spiritual magic tool at all. This self-reflection had a great significance to Lin Yun. This was equivalent to pointing out a clear road for Lin Yun so that he could challenge an extremely powerful Bone Devil once he was a 5th rank Great Mage. Thus, Lin Yun was focused on his book and didn't notice Solomon standing outside the door. While Lin Yun read explanations of the Max formula in the Sage Tower, the Gilded Rose called together an alchemy exhibition. The contents of that exhibition included 4 excellent magic tools, 2 magic weapons, as well as alchemy puppet dedicated for mining called Miner. But the focus was on the so-called hope potions. Indeed, the hope potions that could easily make a magic apprentice reach the 9th rank. Along with the appearance of the hope potion, this small-scale alchemy exhibition immediately caused a stir in the entire Thousand Sails city. And due to this exhibition, the name of the Gilded Rose was remembered by countless people. Many people found out that after Loch Merlin died, the flashing gold chamber of commerce didn't disappear. They still had an alchemy shop in the victorious return street called the Gilded Rose. The magical potion that allowed magic apprentices to easily reach the 9th rank was developed by the Gilded Rose. After finishing all this, the old butler smiled as he priced the hope potion at 200,000 gold while also asserting that he only had 1 potion in hand. After the sale, the next bottle would appear 1 month later. Such a price would stop ordinary magic apprentices with no background and no savings from getting a chance to buy it, as 200,000 gold was a truly astronomical sum to them. But apart from these ordinary magic apprentices, Thousand Sails City still had many more unusual ones. There was no lack of children from the leaders of major forces, and neither was there any lack of children that were born in well-off merchant families. Such a price wasn't a big deal to them. Their only worry would be that they didn't buy it fast enough. Chapter 50, Hope Potion. This chapter is updated by novels.pl. In fact, not even 3 minutes after the end of the alchemy exhibition, the bottle of hope potion already had a new owner. The lucky guy was a 3rd rank magic apprentice called Cruz. Cruz was 28 years old and had neither an illustrious background nor an outstanding gift. This in itself made it very difficult for him to become a mage. His only fortune was that he was also a pretty decent apprentice alchemist. Ever since he became an apprentice alchemist, Cruz had been working with major alchemy shops as a part-timer for various alchemists. He had saved a lot in the past 10 years, yet he hadn't saved too much, only around 200,000 gold. Originally, Cruz had come to the Gilded Rose today in order to buy a few magic scrolls, but he hadn't expected that he would chance upon the Gilded Rose's alchemy exhibition and get one of the first seats. Thus, that hope potion fell into Cruz's hands. That lucky 3rd rank magic apprentice used his shivering hands to open the hope potion and slowly drink it before countless eyes. Then, the miracle happened. The mana within Cruz instantly began to grow at a crazy pace. 4th rank, 5th rank, 6th rank all the way until he had the power of a 9th rank magic apprentice. In a matter of about half an hour, Cruz attained the power of a peak 9th rank magic apprentice from the early 3rd rank. He almost reached the level of mana whirlpool condensation. This all happened under countless staring gazes. Over 100 onlookers saw this scene with their own eyes, and the instant Cruz reached the 9th rank, the entire Gilded Rose shook. The magic apprentices that had still doubted the offerings of the alchemy exhibition were now striving to be first to ask questions about the hope potion. Among them were those who were born with illustrious backgrounds who were offering twice or thrice the asking price to obtain a bottle of hope potion. Now, to them, there was no problem that couldn't be solved with gold. Unfortunately, gold couldn't settle their problem right now, because the old butler was very clear: the hope potion was out of stock this month, and if they wanted to buy one, they would have to come early the next month. Thus, a group of magic apprentices who were yearning for the potion left the Gilded Rose with regrets and a bit of hope. Naturally, there were also those who didn't agree to leave. Most of these people were children of people with influence, scions of various forces leaders. They were accustomed to using their parents' reputations to settle their problems. Since they couldn't buy the potion with money, they would naturally try to use their parents' names as usual, and among them, There were a few who were quite impatient and tried this immediately. They tried to get the Gilded Rose to supply Hope Potion to them first, or else if Lin Yun was there, he would have played with the guests a bit. Although the Hope Potion wasn't there, the glass bottle would definitely be enough, as it still had magical properties. Naturally the old butler wouldn't be this cruel. After following Loch Merlin for so many years, how could he not know how to handle this matter? There are so many of you here, so who should be served first? How about you discuss it amongst yourselves? After saying such words, the old butler just walked away and left behind the 8 magic apprentices with outstanding backgrounds. A staring contest ensued, and no one was willing to give way for any of the others. Thus, they were in a deadlock for the whole afternoon. Nothing could be done about it. Who would give up on such an opportunity? Getting the bottle of Hope Potion that would be available 1 month later. Even just a month's difference in the time it took to become a 9th rank magic apprentice would be enough for the rest to fall behind. The few magic apprentices left were all born in major forces. Who would be willing to fall behind? As for the conclusion of this conflict, the old butler definitely didn't care about it. 1 bottle of Hope Potion a month was the sale schedule that he decided on after consulting Lin Yun, because the two of them felt that even compared to earning several million gold, the reputation of the Gilded Rose was more important. Selling all the Hope Potions at once could indeed let the Gilded Rose earn a few million gold in an instant, but the sensational effect wouldn't last long. After 3 months at most, the people would gradually forget about the Hope Potion, and even gradually forget about the Gilded Rose if they had no further accomplishments. After all, the foundation of the Gilded Rose was too shallow compared to those alchemy shops that had operated for decades. Whether it was its reputation or public opinion, they were both far inferior. The only advantage at the moment was the Hope Potion they possessed. Since this was the case, they would naturally promote the Hope Potion to its limit. 1 Hope Potion a month. At first glance, it seemed that it would only bring in 200,000 gold each month, but the craze it would create would put the Gilded Rose at the center of discussions. Every time a Hope Potion was sold, it would lead to people chatting about it during their leisure time. When the craze about the potion started to cool down, the next Hope Potion would appear, and along with it, new stories and new topics to gossip about. And with the miraculous effect of the Hope Potion, how long would it take for the Gilded Rose to establish a good reputation in Thousand Sails City? To the Gilded Rose, this was worth a lot more than a few 100,000 gold. Along with the sale of the first bottle of Hope Potion and the rise of the 3rd rank magic apprentice cruise to 9th rank, the Gilded Rose caught the attention of the entire Thousand Sails City, including that of the Monchai family. The analysis of the Volcano Potion and the Ghost Potion was reaching its end. The 2 great alchemists from the Black Tower reported that the more technical problems had more or less been solved. Only a few issues were left, but they could be figured out given enough time. At that time, Monchai spent 4 million gold to purchase the 2 potions so that he could obtain alchemy support from the Black Tower. Now that the study of the 2 potions was reaching its end, it would be their turn to help the Monchai family. The 2 great alchemists had already freed themselves from their analytic work and begun fully helping with nurturing the Monchai family's alchemists. At the same time, the Monchai family's alchemy shops were making all kinds of preparations for their official openings. But at this time, the Gilded Rose suddenly had an alchemy exhibition and announced the Hope Potion that shocked the entire Thousand Sails City. To the numerous magic apprentices, this was a huge boon, but to the Monchai family, this was grievous news. After the contents of the alchemy exhibition spread out, Monchai had been restless. After thinking about it, he invited the 2 great alchemists from the Black Tower. This is impossible. The 2 great alchemists instantly cut Monchai off and denied the possibility of the existence of the Hope Potion. But as they saw Monchai's confused expression, the 2 great alchemists reined in their tempers and added a few explanatory sentences. According to them, a potion that could easily let a magic apprentice reach the 9th rank would need materials that could strengthen mana, because only such materials would be able to replace the normally required meditation and achieve the effect of completing the mana gathering in a short time. In the field of potion-earing, A material that could strengthen mana wasn't something that 1 or 200,000 gold would be enough to make up for. A conservative estimate would be a production cost of a clean million. And the Gilded Rose was only selling it for 200,000 gold. How could it not be impossible? A scam. This is definitely a scam. Ultimately, the two great mages used a tone full of certainty to issue their verdict. Right then, just behind them, the Monchai family's butler, Jonathan, ran over while gasping. Master, the 9th rank magic apprentice is really at the 9th rank. Why are you panicking? After Monchai berated Jonathan, he smiled at the two great alchemists and sent them off. He then waited until the silhouettes of the two alchemists were far in the distance before his face turned completely dark. A manufacturing cost of 1,000,000 gold? Haha, how could the Gilded Rose come out with that? Master, it's okay, I already understood. Monchai interrupted Jonathan and directly ordered him, go find me that magic apprentice. Ah? Jonathan froze. His first thought was that his master didn't believe him, so he hastily reasserted, Master, that magic apprentice truly reached the 9th rank. I said I understood. Monchai's heart was already restless enough. He looked at Jonathan impatiently, feeling irritated as he raised his voice. So what if he's a 9th rank magic apprentice? Could it be that you can't turn him back into a 3rd rank magic apprentice? Yes, I understand. With this prompt from Monchai, Jonathan repeatedly nodded and awkwardly ran out of the study. After Jonathan was driven away, Monchai sat alone in the study for a while. Half an hour later, he had someone call Ryan. Ryan, please go to the Alchemist Guild on my behalf and seek Granger. Tell him that our Chambers of Commerce Union found out that the sale of the Hope Potion of the Gilded Rose is a very serious fraudulent action and already caused a very nasty influence. Our Chambers of Commerce Union hopes that the Alchemist Guild will hold a hearing to find out the problem behind it. Also, conveniently tell him that our Twin Moons Chamber of Commerce has a batch of rare magic materials that will be shipped. If Great Alchemist Granger is interested, he can get a decent discount. Yes, Father.